Power, a prize sought by many yet grasped by few. But what if I told you that some of history's most feared rulers held their thrones not through strength alone, but through psychology? In this dark theater of minds, they bent entire nations to their will. Today, we'll unmask the 3 psychological tricks these tyrants used, so you may recognize them before they're used on you. Fear, it is the most obedient of servants. It does not argue, it does not reason, it does not hesitate. Once planted in the hearts of men, it blooms with a poison that clouds the mind and chains the will. History's darkest rulers understood this better than any philosopher. They knew that power is not taken, it is surrendered, and nothing makes a man surrender faster than terror gnawing at his bones. Imagine a city at dusk, its people weary from hardship, uncertain of tomorrow. This is where the cunning leader begins his work. He whispers of unseen enemies, plots lurking beyond the horizon, traitors hiding among familiar faces. He breathes life into shadows until they tower over the people like giants, and when they look to him with wide, desperate eyes, he steps forward as their savior, the only barrier between them and chaos. Fear is the sculptor of unity. Nothing binds a scattered crowd faster than a common terror. When people are afraid, they cling to each other, and to the one who claims to protect them. The tyrant does not need to be loved, only feared more than the enemy he invents. He crafts stories of conspiracies, of hostile outsiders sharpening knives, of internal traitors plotting to destroy the homeland. It matters little if these threats exist. What matters is that the people believe they do. You see, fear simplifies the world. It erases the questions that breed rebellion. A fearful mind does not debate, it obeys. And so, the tyrant floods the air with dread. Broadcasts of danger, warnings of invasion, prophecies of doom. Every newspaper, every speech, every whispered rumor becomes a drop in an ocean of anxiety. Soon, the people are drowning, and in their panic, they beg for order. Even if that order arrives on the boots of soldiers. And when the tyrant strikes, when he crushes dissenters and silences critics, he cloaks the brutality as necessity. He claims it is not cruelty but caution. The people watch their neighbors vanish into prisons, yet they nod in grim approval. They say it is for our safety. Fear reshapes morality itself, twisting oppression into protection. The tyrant never calls his chains chains. He calls them shields. But fear must be carefully maintained, like a fire that must never go out. Too little, and the people grow bold. Too much, and they may turn on their master. So the tyrant staggers the doses, releasing waves of terror followed by moments of false calm, like the eye of a storm. He lets them breathe just enough to feel relief, so they will thank him for sparing them from the very terror he orchestrated. Gratitude forged from fear is the strongest leash a ruler can place around a populace. Even their personal lives are not spared. The tyrant teaches them to spy on each other, to suspect their friends, to doubt their own kin. Fear corrodes trust until no one dares to speak freely. In this climate, rebellion becomes unthinkable, not because the people are loyal, but because they are isolated. Each man becomes a silent island, and islands do not revolt. The tyrant knows this. Break the bonds between the people, and they will clutch only to him. And should an enemy be defeated, should the threat vanish, the tyrant will conjure another. Fear must never be allowed to die. Without fear, the people may begin to ask questions. Without fear, they may remember they are many and he is one. So he breathes new life into old ghosts, invents fresh demons, warns of invisible plots. The target does not matter: foreigners, rebels, heretics, ideologies, imaginary cabals. What matters is the continued presence of the storm, so the people will always seek the shelter he offers. Fear is the invisible fortress in which tyranny thrives. Walls of stone can be broken, but walls of terror live inside the mind, and minds are harder to liberate than cities. The tyrant does not need to chain the people's bodies when he can chain their thoughts. He understands that fear paralyzes ambition, strangles defiance, and blinds the eyes that might see him for what he truly is. This is why he feeds it daily, like a priest tending a sacred flame, because he knows that as long as the people fear everything, they will fear him most of all. Fear may force obedience, but worship ensures devotion, and devotion, my friend, is far more enduring than mere submission. The tyrants who scarred history understood this distinction well. They knew that to truly rule the minds of men, they must cease to appear as men at all. They had to ascend in the eyes of their subjects into something more, something sacred, untouchable, eternal. The architect of a cult of personality does not present himself as a leader among men. He presents himself as the embodiment of the nation, the spirit of the people clothed in mortal flesh. His image is painted on walls, carved into stone, sung in schools, whispered in bedtime stories. His name becomes a hymn. Each word of praise builds an invisible throne, and soon, the people no longer see the man. They see the myth. This transformation is not left to chance. It is calculated, orchestrated with the precision of a symphony. Every public appearance becomes a ritual, every gesture rehearsed to radiate confidence and destiny. He does not walk, he arrives. He does not speak, he proclaims. He does not argue, he reveals truths. Even silence becomes a weapon, for the people will fill the void with their own imagined greatness on his behalf. Symbols are his currency. He drapes himself in colors, flags, emblems, slogans, anything that sears his presence into the collective eye. His portrait multiplies across cities like a sacred relic. It watches from classroom walls, government halls, even from the worn paper of their currency. In time, the people feel his gaze upon them always. They begin to act as though he is watching, even when he is not. And that, you see, is the true triumph, when the people police themselves in his name. But worship cannot be demanded outright. It must be seduced. The tyrant showers the masses with grand spectacles, parades, ceremonies, colossal rallies where their cheers echo like the voice of destiny itself. He lets them bathe in the illusion that they are not mere followers but chosen witnesses to greatness. This flattery intoxicates them. They do not serve him out of duty. They serve him out of pride. They tell themselves, we are part of something historic. And in that belief, they surrender their skepticism. Propaganda becomes his scripture. Artists, poets, filmmakers, journalists, all are summoned to weave the myth. They erase his flaws, magnify his smallest achievements into miracles, and drench his words in poetry. Even his failures are reframed as trials sent by fate to prove his heroism. In this crafted narrative, he is never wrong, never weak, never ordinary. He stands outside the laws that bind other men, and once the people accept this illusion, they cease to judge him by mortal standards. Doubt becomes dangerous, not for him, but for those who dare to voice it. When the cult is complete, to question the leader is to question the nation itself. Critics are branded as traitors, heretics, enemies of the collective soul. The tyrant does not even need to silence dissent personally. The people will do it for him. They will shout down their neighbors, report their friends, exile their own kin to protect the purity of the myth they have embraced. In defending him, they believe they are defending themselves. And notice this, as their reverence grows, their memory shrinks. They forget what came before him. They forget that their land, their culture, their future could exist without his shadow stretched across it. The cult erases history and rewrites it in his image. He becomes the origin of all things, the wellspring of every success, the father of every victory. The people cannot imagine the sun rising without his command, and so they cease to imagine life without him entirely. This is the trap concealed in adoration. When a leader becomes the symbol of hope, people will forgive any crime to protect that hope. They will excuse brutality as necessity, corruption as strategy, deceit as genius. They would rather blind themselves to his monstrosities than admit they worshipped a false idol, and so they defend him with a ferocity stronger than fear because they believe they are defending their own identity. The tyrant knows this. He knows that once the people merge their sense of self with his image, they will not abandon him, even if he leads them into ruin. Unity is the one force tyrants fear, for a united people can topple even the mightiest throne, and so the clever despot does not always strike his enemy's head on. No, he cleaves them from one another, fractures their bonds, and scatters their strength like dust in the wind. He does not conquer through brute force alone. He conquers by making the people conquer themselves. Observe how he studies the landscape of society as a hunter studies the herd. He looks for cracks, old grievances, buried resentments, subtle lines of difference, wealth and poverty, race and religion, tribe and class, region and ideology. These are his tools, his chisels. He does not need to create hatred from nothing. He merely needs to whisper to the hatred that already sleeps in their bones, and it will awaken like a starving beast. He speaks to each faction in a different tongue, telling every group that it alone is righteous, that it alone is wronged, that it alone deserves to rise above the others. He strokes their egos while stoking their suspicions. To one, he promises protection from imagined enemies. To another, he promises revenge for ancient slights. Each side believes they are chosen, special, and endangered. And so they turn their gaze away from the throne and toward each other, claws bared. This is the genius of division. It blinds. The people become so consumed with battling their neighbors that they do not notice their freedoms slipping quietly into the tyrant's grasp. They do not see his chains tightening around them because they are too busy forging shackles for one another. Each insult hurled between them is a brick removed from the fortress of solidarity they once shared. And when that fortress crumbles, they will find themselves standing alone, surrounded not by allies, but by enemies the tyrant has carefully arranged like chess pieces. To deepen the rift, he ensures each faction lives in its own echo chamber. He feeds them separate news, separate truths, separate realities. He gives each group its own champions and villains, its own sacred symbols and forbidden words. Over time, they no longer speak the same language, not just of words but of meaning. A single event is seen as triumph by one and catastrophe by another. And when truth itself splinters, unity becomes impossible, for a people who cannot agree on reality cannot unite to defend it. He knows that fear alone can make people obey, but division can make them defend his rule. They will beg him to punish their rivals, to silence the voices that oppose their tribe. They will cheer as he crushes their fellow citizens, believing they are witnessing justice. And in their cheers, he grows stronger. Every punishment he delivers becomes a performance, a sacrifice offered to one faction to please them while terrifying the rest. This spectacle convinces each group that they need him to survive. Even their suffering becomes a weapon in his hands. If famine comes, he tells each side the others are hoarding. If poverty spreads, he whispers that their rivals are stealing what is rightfully theirs. If blood is spilled, he ensures each group blames the other. And when despair turns to rage, they do not march on his palace. They march on each other's homes. The streets run red not with rebellion, but with civil strife that leaves the throne untouched. He will even fabricate enemies within his own loyal ranks. He will accuse former allies of betrayal, purge them publicly, and parade their downfall as proof of his eternal vigilance. This spectacle teaches the people that no one is beyond suspicion. It forces them to pick sides again and again, until loyalty itself becomes meaningless and trust evaporates like mist. In this chaos, he stands as the only constant, the only pillar left standing amid the ruins he has orchestrated. And the most exquisite cruelty of division is that it convinces the people they are acting of their own will. They will believe their hatred is their choice, their suspicion their wisdom, their violence their duty. They will not see the invisible hand that guides their fury. They will not realize they are dancing on strings while imagining themselves free. The tyrant smiles at this illusion, for a divided people require no chains. They carry their prisons within their hearts, guarding the very walls that keep them apart. There is a moment when the tyrant ceases to merely control the people's actions and begins to own their conscience. This is the black art of moral inversion, where cruelty is crowned as duty and mercy is mocked as weakness. History's darkest leaders did not simply command obedience. They reshaped the very meaning of right and wrong until the people could commit atrocities with clear hearts. believing themselves virtuous as they stained their hands in blood. This transformation does not begin with decrees, but with stories. The tyrant weaves a tale in which the nation is not merely a land, but a sacred vessel, eternally besieged by enemies who seek its destruction. He teaches that survival demands terrible sacrifices, yes, but noble ones. He whispers that those who suffer under his rule are not victims, but offerings for the greater good. And once this poison seeps into their minds, the people stop seeing suffering as a tragedy. They see it as proof of loyalty. He understands that morality is not destroyed by force, it is reversed by persuasion. So he rebrands oppression as protection, censorship as purity, slaughter as salvation. He floods the air with language soaked in righteousness. Prison camps become re-education centers. Secret police become guardians of peace. Mass purges are called cleansings, as though they scrub filth from the soul of the nation. He dresses his brutality in the robes of virtue until the people kneel before it in reverence. Soon they begin to parrot his words. They recite his slogans as prayers, not noticing how each chant carves away their humanity. They applaud punishments they once would have wept at. They celebrate executions as if they were harvest festivals, telling themselves it is not death, it is justice. Their hearts grow hard, their empathy shrivels, and they wear their cruelty as a badge of honor. The tyrant has succeeded, for he has taught them to confuse obedience with morality. Even dissent becomes reframed as evil. The tyrant paints his critics not as rivals, but as monsters, corruptors, disease, bearers gnawing at the roots of the sacred order. To question him is not portrayed as disagreement, it is blasphemy. He convinces the people that mercy toward dissent is betrayal, that compassion is complicity. Under this spell, they do not merely suppress opposition, they despise it. They hunt it with righteous fury, believing they are saving the world from ruin. He will even rewrite history to suit this inverted morality. The past becomes a fable where every cruelty he commits now is shown as having ancient precedent, divine justification. His deeds are framed as echoes of legendary heroes, his massacres as echoes of mythical purifications. This false lineage convinces the people that they are not witnessing horror, but continuity, that they are heirs to a brutal greatness that demands blood as its currency. And once they see themselves as part of this sacred chain, they will defend their crimes as tradition. The most chilling aspect is how this inversion seeps into their personal lives. They begin to judge one another by their willingness to inflict harm in the tyrant's name. The loyal son who betrays his father becomes a model of patriotism. The neighbor who denounces his friend is praised as vigilant. Betrayal becomes loyalty, cruelty becomes virtue, and love becomes weakness. They no longer measure goodness by kindness or truth, but by how ruthlessly one serves the cause. Their souls are twisted until they fit perfectly into the machinery of tyranny. And when their hands tremble from what they've done, the tyrant offers them absolution. He tells them their guilt is proof of their purity, that their pain is the price of righteousness. He sanctifies their sins, wraps them in ceremonial words, and crowns them heroes for their crimes. In this way he traps them utterly, for if they ever dared to admit what they have become, their hearts would shatter, so they double down, they harden themselves. They cannot walk back through the blood, and so they convince themselves it is not blood at all, but the ink of destiny, the mark of the chosen, and so the mask is lifted. The darkest rulers of history did not rise on brute strength alone. They climbed the spines of human minds. They sowed fear to shatter courage, forged worship to eclipse reason, split the people into warring fragments, and inverted morality until evil wore the face of virtue. These were not accidents. They were instruments, played with cold precision. Remember this, tyranny is not built in distant palaces. It is built in the thoughts of ordinary men, and only those who see the strings can refuse to dance to their pull.